I know that this is a very cliche joke, but I still have to ask. Will I finish the season or will the season finish me? This episode had so much of everything from sweet little interactions to world building and expanding the world. The main thing, to me personally, was obviously the official introduction of Chopper. Nothing could have prepared me for the full force of cuteness of that little guy, not even watching that introduction video that Netflix released ages ago. All I can say right now is, here's my adoption papers. It's ridiculous how this CGI deer thingy with a voice actress behind it doing a cute voice can have such a strong hold on me. He's like the second cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. But on a more serious note, props to the team for not saving budget and time by hiding Chopper when he's in the background of a scene. For example, they still added how he walked down the steps while he was in the background of a shot, or they included a small nod from him while Kureya was explaining what's wrong with Nami. And maybe that's only because this is his introduction, but I would love it if in the future the team continued including him in the scenes equally as much as the actual actors. But before I keep going on how adorable Chopper is, here's a few quick things. First, if you're new here, then all you need to know is that I'm going into Season 2 blindly, other than the trailers. After Season 1, I've also read the first 95 chapters of the manga, which is only the content already covered in Season 1, so while in my videos I sometimes refer to the manga, it's not about the future events. By the way, after Season 2, I will continue the manga and make reviews on that as well. Another quick reminder is please don't leave any spoilers in the comments without warning. And that includes telling me what was changed and what was kept from the source material, because I will eventually read it for myself. Thank you. But let's go back to the discussion. I took quite a lot of notes, so for the sake of some structure, as usual, I will go through them in a more or less chronological order. The first scene was between Miss All Sunday and Wapol. Mr. Zero wasn't present even if the meeting took place in his office, and Miss All Sunday said that they are tying up some especially pesky loose ends. So it most likely means that Mr. Zero went to fight the Straw Hats himself, and it makes perfect sense after that snail call with Sanji that went absolutely well. It also made me consider where is this hideout and how long will it take for Mr. Zero to reach the Straw Hats. If I had to guess, then I actually think that this hideout is in Alabasta, because if Mr. Zero is trying to overthrow the current king, then the most convenient option would be to stay close to the operation. During this scene, we also heard the name of Cobra for the first time, and what's interesting is that cobras as animals are reptiles, just like crocodiles are. So, while very distant, they are still relatives. Last episode, I proposed a theory that Mr. Zero, or Crocodile, has some sort of relation to Alabasta that makes him believe that ruling this kingdom is his right, and that's why he's trying to overthrow the current king, Cobra, and I feel like the names of these two characters support that theory a little bit. And maybe I'm overanalyzing this and the names are just a coincidence, but no one can stop me at this point. The next detail that stood out to me was when Miss All Sunday said that Wapol is in exile from his own kingdom. It's interesting because it kind of contradicts what we learned later in the episode, because Dalton specifically said that Wapol abandoned his kingdom. He didn't mention anything about any exile. It makes me think that Wapol didn't leave fully on his own accord, that something else must have happened, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Dalton himself had something to do with driving Wapol away, but I'll talk more about Dalton a little bit later. Going back to Wapol, it could also be that he did abandon his people, but then those people didn't allow him to come back after such a betrayal. So, in conclusion, to me it seems like this situation isn't as simple as it may sound on the surface. It was a funny moment when one of Wapol's jesters, servants, guards, all in one, I don't know, but the point is, it was a funny moment when one of those guys warned Wapol to be careful about his blood pressure. This feels like the sort of thing that will come back in some form. From the trailers, I know that Wapol will fight the Straw Hats this season, so perhaps Luffy makes him so angry that his blood pressure rises to the point where it gets in Wapol's way. I don't know, it sounds silly, but this is One Piece. I mean, Alvida was defeated by being forced to sneeze from the pepper, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if high blood pressure comes back as a legitimate ally to the Straw Hats in the middle of the fight. Another thing that was mentioned during this scene was the name Blackbeard, and later in the episode we learned even more about this pirate and his siege on Drum Kingdom. I think it's fair to say that Blackbeard is the most recognizable real-world history pirate name alongside Ching Shi, who was also known as the Pirate Queen. So maybe I'm once again making predictions based on nothing but the name, but I think that using a recognizable name like that naturally carries some implications. Let's be real. All the pirates that we faced so far were relatively weak, at least compared to what we're getting in the Grand Line. So if I had to bet, then I think that the gap between the pirates that we fought in Season 1 and someone like Blackbeard is going to be massive. And when I say massive, I mean it will be like meeting Mihawk for the first time and seeing the power ceiling after thinking that Zoro was someone insanely strong. So I'm very excited to meet this Blackbeard whenever it might be. And since I'm on the topic of the most famous real-world pirates, I already mentioned Ching Shi a bit earlier as another super recognizable name. She was a pirate queen from China. In One Piece, we have a pirate king in Gold Roger, so let's just say I'm throwing out another quick theory how it would be cool to meet a pirate queen too at some point down the line. And I have two more things that I want to address, and then I promise I will be finished with the opening scene of episode 6 and we can move on. First, I think that by giving Wapol a devil fruit, Baroque Works are actually setting him up for failure. Wapol looks like a spoiled king who probably doesn't exactly have any real battle experience, and jumping into a fight with a freshly acquired devil fruit power is simply idiotic. And on top of that, as Miss All Sandy walked away from Wapol, her look definitely screamed that this guy is cooked and that she very much enjoyed that idea. The only thing that makes me doubt that is that it would be interesting, to say the least, that Baroque Works would waste something as valuable as a devil fruit on someone like Wapol. But my thought process is that Baroque Works seem to use chaos as a tool to reach their goals, so even if Wapol gets taken out, he will still do some significant damage before that and weaken his enemies. Which means that it would be easier for Baroque Works to sweep in and take care of what's left. So that's what I think and why I believe that giving Wapol a devil fruit was a curse and not a gift. And my final point is trying to guess what kind of power this devil fruit gives. In the trailer, they showed how Wapol's jaw extended, and one of his defining characteristics is his appetite. Even Miss All Sandy herself spoke about that appetite, so I am making the most basic guess that his power is literally going to be eating. Maybe he will be able to eat everything and anything and instantly digest it. There was actually a very minor character in another show that I watched that had the exact same power, and he was a pretty scary opponent, but that's a bit off topic. My point is that I believe that this devil fruit is a munch fruit or chomp fruit or something like that. It will be very funny if I actually guess this, because I already had someone in the comments accuse me that I've actually read the manga. I think it was before season 2, and I don't even know which part of what I said made them believe that, because they didn't specify, but the point is that I may be digging my grave even deeper every time I make a new guess. But all that is a side note, so let's go back to the episode. We checked up on Nami, who definitely wasn't doing too well. Sanji's worry for her killed me this episode. Personally, I wasn't even worried for Nami, but I definitely felt the worry of the other Straw Hats, especially Sanji. I feel like it always happens to me with fictional stories. For example, when a character dies, maybe 60% of the times I don't even cry, but what always makes me cry almost without exceptions is seeing other characters react to those events. It's just like with episode 3 of this season, where I cried not for Igaram, but for Vivi. To me, this is one of the most beautiful aspects of storytelling. Even if we know that the characters will be okay, even if we know that on a surface level there are no real stakes, but we still care because the characters are feeling all those emotions and we care about those characters. We feel empathetic. Human brains can't really differentiate between real emotions and fictional ones. Obviously, we do know that fictional characters are not real people, but speaking strictly on an emotional level, even if the characters are fake, but the emotions they trigger are neurologically real, and I find this aspect of fiction so fascinating. So, going back to this episode, I think that they portrayed the worry of the Straw Hats beautifully because I felt it deep in my heart. It was very sad when Nami told Sanji, "I'm not hungry," because that's like the worst thing you can tell Sanji when feeding people is his love language. Another hard-hitting line was Sanji saying, "Nami, that was 4 days ago," after she said she just fainted yesterday. It's such a classic trope. We have seen it a million times, but it's fine because it's very effective in shocking audiences and establishing just how bad the situation is. And the last line I want to highlight is Nami saying, "Thank you for worrying about me." It stands out not for the gratitude part, but because of the specific phrasing that she used. I also want to group this line with what Nami told Luffy later in the episode. "I am counting on you, Captain." These lines are very significant when Nami's whole arc in Season 1 was about fighting alone. It was about relying on no one but herself. It was about how difficult it was for her to ask for help. But now she's counting on her crew. Now she's thanking them for worrying about her, and that's such a beautiful character growth. But let's take a short pause from all this overly emotional discussion and talk about that shirtless Zoro fan service. It's so funny because it feels like season 1 was a bit more modest, but in season 2 the creators just embraced the fact that they have assembled a very hot cast, both with men and women. In this episode alone, we had multiple shirtless straw hats, Miss All Sunday in leather, Smoker being a smoker, and you know what? Good for them. I'm definitely not complaining. But next, let's move on to Smoker and Tashigi. I think it would be easier if I combined all their scenes in this episode into a single discussion portion. They went to the Isle of Rines, and I swear I've seen this name somewhere. Maybe I'm just having a weird deja vu moment, but the name seems very familiar. Apparently, it's an outpost for intercepting and tracing calls, and I am very curious why Baroque works were there. I feel like I'm missing a piece of a puzzle. Sure, we had that one interesting conversation with Mr. Zero, but I doubt it had anything worth attacking this outpost over. Before that, there was also Usopp sending Kaya a message, but that definitely wouldn't be interesting to Baroque Works. I also doubt that it would help with tracking the Straw Hats, especially since Baroque Works already kind of know where they are going, so my best guess at the moment is that Baroque Works were trying to delete some calls that the audience didn't see and hide their tracks that way. On a semi-related note, the sight of those snails was horrible. They looked like someone poured salt on them, and if you know, you know, and if you don't know, then I seriously hope that you never see that in person. On a brighter note, I was very happy to get an update on Tashigi and Smoker. Their relationship is very cute, and I hope they get some sort of resolution this season, whatever it might be. I would love to see another confrontation with the Straw Hats, but I don't know how realistic this is when it feels like so much still needs to happen in these last 2 episodes. In this episode, there was a short misunderstanding where Tashigi and the Smoker thought that it were the Straw Hats that attacked the communications outpost. And I am so happy that this misunderstanding was cleared up pretty much immediately, and now they know that it were Baroque Works and not our guys. I, from the bottom of my heart, despise the misunderstanding trope 99% of the time. It's very rare for any story to do it right, so I am very happy we won't have to deal with a mess like that. Next, we met Miss Thursday and Mr. 11. Honestly, I'm a bit surprised because I genuinely thought that Mr. 11 didn't exist and that we only saw Mr. 13 just for the sake of having Friday the 13th. Now I'm curious how many Baroque Works agents there are still left. From the ladies, we still didn't see Tuesday and Saturday, plus there's plenty of holidays to choose from. And from the men's side, there are still a lot of numbers left, including high-ranking officer agents. So I'm assuming Baroque Works as an enemy will take more than one season to defeat, and we will see the rest of the agents in season 3, because once again I just don't see how they could cram everything into remaining 2 episodes of season 2. A little side note is that it was absolutely hilarious how Miss Thursday got the T-Rex treatment, if you know what I mean. Also, the more I see of Smoker and his fights, the more convinced I am that his powers really are fueled by smoking cigars. I'm telling you, the next time Luffy fights him, he should try stealing those cigars just to check what happens. On Tashigi's side, she took down Mr. 11 and claimed her first sword, Kashu, which is apparently the same grade as Zoro's Yubashiri, so that's a fun connection. Tashigi probably feels like she lost Yubashiri, even if technically it was never hers, but now she gained one equal sword, so I like this balance. I would love to see Tashigi's collection of swords grow over time. I don't need to see every single battle, but it would be nice to get an occasional update and each time see a longer list of reclaimed swords. But let's move on to Vivi and the Straw Hats now. I already liked Vivi a lot, but after this episode I love her. Vivi's journey this episode started off strong, with that tough decision she had to make between going straight to Alabasta and finding a doctor for Nami. It was a short scene, but it felt significant to me. This dilemma of choosing between a whole kingdom and a friend is definitely not an easy one, and I loved how Vivi handled that. She's a good leader precisely because she cares about people so much. Last episode, I wondered how our guys would find a doctor without Nami to navigate them, and apparently it was an accident, so that makes sense. Also, Drum Kingdom is a very beautiful place, and I might be biased because I absolutely love winter, but still, I was like Luffy and I was marveling at the snow on that island. Before entering this place, we got Vivi's flashback and it was a lot of information to digest. I believe most of it isn't even relevant right now and it was just a soft setup for the future, but still, I wrote down quite a few things for future reference. We saw Pangaea Castle and it's very interesting because Pangaea, with this exact same spelling, is a supercontinent that existed before all our continents split. If it's not an accident and was purposeful, then I like the symbolism of that, because it seems that Pangaea Castle serves as either the headquarters of the world government or at the very least it's one of their main locations, so the name serves like a symbol of unity. And it also fits with the design of their flag because it's also 5 connected dots. Now, whether that unifying force of the world government is a good thing or a bad thing still remains to be seen, but I still found this little detail very interesting. The castle was located on Holy Land of, and I don't know how to pronounce that name, but the spelling looks like it could be French, so unless I am proven otherwise, then I will say the Holy Land of Marie-Joise. I don't have additional notes on this one, but Marie-Joise is probably a historic figure within One Piece universe. During this meeting, I counted 31 people at the table, so I'm assuming it means 31 kingdom in the Grand Line. It's just a guess, but this seemed like a Grand Line exclusive meeting and there were no representatives from any of the 4 seas, but like I said, that's just a guess. I'm wondering if it's possible for our crew to visit all 31 places. I highly doubt that, especially given how log pose works based on randomization, but I also don't think that it's entirely impossible. At the very least, I guess we will visit the places of people who spoke, like for example Elysia. I also found it pretty interesting that they kept calling this meeting a reverie. Maybe my English isn't good enough, but I don't think that reverie is a term used for official meetings. As far as I know, it's a word related to daydreaming and all these imaginative thoughts and not to political gatherings. To be fair, this is the world of One Piece, So calling a political meeting a reverie fits when you have all these fancy characters from all their fancy islands, so perhaps that was actually purposeful. I am also so confused about the world government structure. I don't think that these kings and queens are a part of world government. I think they are just responsible for their own separate kingdoms, and there's someone else who's in charge of the military, aka the Marines. Because the spokesperson thanked the Marines for their protection as if they are a completely separate structure. So, whatever the purpose of this reverie was, I think that the world government only hosted it, and at this point in the story, we still didn't see any members of the actual world government. Obviously, don't explain me the political structure of One Piece. If I'm confused, then it's probably because I am meant to be confused at this point in the story, unless I missed some significant detail that was already shown on screen, then it's a completely separate issue. During this meeting, they mentioned that there was a queen of the fishmen that got assassinated and that Jimbe, whose name was mentioned back in season 1, couldn't stop it. My first thought was, did he really fail to stop it? Or perhaps he had something to do with it. This episode and this season in general keeps bringing up the idea of revolutions, so I wouldn't be surprised if this Fishman Queen was actually a tyrant, and it's for the best if she was taken out. Especially given that it was Wapol, of all people, who brought that up, and removing Wapol would also be for the best of the people. I know this might not be relevant right now, but our crew 100% has to go to the Fishman Island at some point, so I bet these things will be explored deeper once we get there, so I just want to put a pin in that. They also once again mentioned Dragon and his revolutionary army. This part didn't provide any new information, except the fact that this revolution has been brewing for at least a decade, because this flashback took place 10 years in the past, and Dragon was apparently already gathering supporters and already seen as a huge threat to the world government. I think it adds mystery to his strength if he was able to evade capture for such a long time, so I like this slow build-up. The slower the build-up, the more satisfying the eventual conflict has the potential to be. And finally, this meeting ended with an argument between Wapol and Cobra. I can see where Vivi gets her kind and strong personality from. That one scene was enough for me to gain full trust in Cobra as a king. I adored his quote, "A king is but a man, and a crown is just a hat. It is the kingdom that endures." I bet this quote was taken directly from the manga. At this point in the story, it's relevant to the Drum Kingdom. They will endure, they will rebuild, they can become a prosperous place again, and they don't need Wapol for that at all. But I'm worried that this quote might also apply to Alabasta itself. Later in the episode, Vivi was right to worry about the state of her country. She has no way of knowing what's happening there, and that's where Usopp's words fit into this situation, because even if she's a princess, it's true that she can't carry all that weight on her shoulders alone. She can only do her best and believe that her kingdom will endure one way or another, but more on that scene a bit later. Going to the present moment, we had that confrontation at the village gate. The moment of Vivi and Luffy bowing was insanely powerful. I love how Vivi teaches Luffy to become a better leader. As much as I love him, it is true that he acts before thinking, and maybe so far he succeeded in punching his way through every conflict, but this strategy won't work forever. He couldn't punch through Nami being sick, right? And it won't be the last time. So I loved how Vivi called him out. I don't want Luffy to change as a character, but there's certainly room to grow as a leader. After that, we met Dalton, and I loved how he instantly recognized Vivi, but not because of her face or hair, but specifically because of her actions. She got shot and then she bowed. And 10 years ago, she got slapped and then she apologized for bumping into Wapol. So I love how the show made sure to emphasize how Dalton recognized who Vivi is as a person before anything else. Inside the village, we learned of Kureha, who had apparently taken over the whole drum castle, so good for her. They also mentioned a flying beast, and it's so funny because they made it sound like Kureha is literally Santa and Chopper is her reindeer, and I hope that there's fan art of that. Luffy decided to climb the mountain, and it was a fantastic sequence as well as a nice leadership moment from Luffy. It's interesting that he didn't try to stretch his arms and pull them up faster, but he probably didn't want to risk Nami when she was in such a bad shape. After all, they doubted she would even make it through the night, so he probably had to be careful. Another interesting thing was Sanji. As a cook, he values his hands. That's the whole reason why he fights exclusively with his legs. But climbing a mountain and in a very cold weather on top of that isn't exactly too gentle on your hands, to put it mildly. There was even a shot where a piece of debris hit his hand right in the middle, so the fact that he still climbed that mountain for Nami shows how much he cares, much more effectively and in a much more powerful way than any words could ever convey. I also believe he would climb that mountain for any of the Straw Hats, including Zoro, yes, because from what I've seen so far, it just seems like one of his main defining characteristics is love and care, which is usually expressed through feeding people. So, in conclusion, even if I knew they would make it up that mountain, there was still some aspects of the climb that raised the emotional stakes for me. And a final side note about Sanji is that I still didn't get that one shot from the trailer of him crying. I've been hyper fixated on that single frame ever since I saw it, and given that Nami is now cured, then I have no idea what else could cause such a reaction from him, and I am scared, but in a good way. One last detail about the climb that I have is that Luffy's last words before collapsing to the ground were, "What a pretty castle." Like, this is my favorite part about Luffy. How even in the most dire situation, he still sees the beauty of the world. How do you even write such a beautiful and inspiring character? It's insane how much I loved that one small moment. And speaking of standout moments, I have to mention how Usopp snapped at Zoro. That was such a real and such a human moment, and I felt it in my bones how much these guys worried for Nami. It's exactly what I spoke about in the beginning of this episode discussion. The emotional core of this conflict isn't Nami being sick, but it's everyone else's reactions and how they deal with it. Another standout moment was Usopp and Vivi's one-on-one conversation. We saw great emotional intelligence from Usopp. He handled Vivi's worries so gracefully. I am also happy that I am getting exactly what I asked for in my episode 3 review. I wanted to see Vivi have one-on-one interactions with all the Straw Hats, and so far she had them with Nami, Luffy, and now Usopp, so I am definitely happy. I am someone who cares about these quiet, intimate interactions even more than anything else in the plot because I love these characters. So I am hoping that in the last 2 episodes we will get even more simple conversations like this. And speaking of relationships, during the flashbacks we got to see more of Igaram, and I loved how he comforted Vivi and how he wiped her tears the same way how he did it in episode 3. It was such a quiet but powerful parallel. I feel like I used the word powerful a lot during this specific discussion, so I needed to expand my vocabulary. But going back to the episode, there was another one-on-one conversation, this time between Dalton and Zoro. It also had a few interesting things. The main one is probably the fact that they seem to be setting up Dalton as the new king of the Drum Kingdom. It's the whole classic idea about how if you don't want power, then that's how people know that you deserve it. And I think that's what Zoro saw in Dalton and why he offered to lend his sword if Drum needed that. If Dalton actually becomes a king, it's also cool how the Straw Hats would have an important ally, because Dalton clearly witnessed that our guys are good pirates, especially when Princess Vivi is traveling with them and clearly cares about them. It could be a cool situation in the future where maybe if the Straw Hats are in trouble, then people with good reputation and influence, like Dalton if he becomes king, could vouch for them. A couple of side notes about Dalton is that he has great hair, and also I am very intrigued by his weapon that hangs on his back. It looks like a very large shovel, so I am definitely excited to see it in action at some point. And that's where we get to the final scene of episode 6 inside the castle. I didn't even consider the possibility that Nami could have been bitten by something on Little Garden, but that's such a good and realistic point to address. I also love how humans and sea monsters aren't the only dangers in the Grand Line. Even the environment itself can be dangerous, as we saw with Kestia, or even climbing a mountain in a very cold weather. I believe we will encounter even more dangers that can't be punched, kicked, cut, or shot. For example, the most basic idea I can come up with is a big storm and our crew trying to protect themselves and the ship in that storm. But moving on is that in the castle we met Chopper and Kureya, or Dr. Rin. I already spoke about the little guy at the beginning of this review, but Kureya is cool too. I have a soft spot for rock music, and she was introduced to a soundtrack of that specific genre, so I am already sold, I'm sorry. But on a more serious note, I trust her, and the reason is very simple. It's how she interacted with Chopper. She taught him, and the little guy looked very excited to answer all her questions, so that's all the proof I need to believe that Kureya is trustworthy. It's a similar situation to, for example, Smoker's introduction. How he treated that little girl and her ice cream was enough proof for me that he's a good guy. I also adore that Kureya is 139 years old. It's another less direct way to show how good of a doctor she is if she reached such age while still looking young. And Luffy calling her grandma was absolutely hilarious. There was also one absolutely heartbreaking detail. When Luffy ran into the room, he referred to Chopper's big little guy form as a huge beast, and the look on Chopper's face was so sad, and I don't want to see that look ever again. I most likely will, but I don't want to. Luffy, my boy, I love you, but don't you ever speak ill about the little guy again. One last thing that I think I forgot to mention earlier is that Wapol really reminds me of Morgan, and I mean specifically the manga version of Morgan because he was toned down quite a bit for the live action. And it's not just the metal jaws. I mean their personalities are very similar in how just pure evil they both are. Please don't ever let Wapol into the same room as Chopper. Thank you. Another side note is that Wapol's name is really funny. I kind of can't take him seriously when his name sounds like that. I don't know what, if anything, his name means, but it just has very soft and round sound, kind of like the word bubble, if you know what I mean. Maybe we could just push him off the mountain and let him roll down the hill like a snowball. But I think that's all I have for today. I honestly have no idea what to expect from the last 2 episodes. I feel like a lot will go down inside that castle, both action-wise and emotions-wise. I also heard some rumors that episode 7 in particular will be very emotional, so wish me good luck with that one. Or as Usopp would say, wish me good luck. But anyway, thank you for listening. If you're interested, you can subscribe. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and hopefully I will see you again for the discussion of episode 7.